try to get started. Appreciate everybody's flexibility and acknowledgement that sometimes technology can be our biggest challenge, right? So my name is Raquel Rose. I get the opportunity of being an assistant superintendent in this county, and I've been here in Marin for 20 plus years, working in a variety of roles that have ranged from after-school coordinator for a nonprofit agency to a site-based principal, a classroom teacher, a literacy coach, director of special education, and most recently, I'm getting the chance to be an interim superintendent in the Mill Valley School District, which is bringing me back to my days working in more directly in schools. But today, I'm here representing the Marin County Office of Education, and I truly feel like my opportunity of working with the county office has been such a gift to me. And it's a gift to me because it gives me the chance to see all that is happening across this great county. The good, right? The bad, and the ugly at times. But what it also gives me is a chance to see where there could be a lot of opportunity. And where I see a lot of opportunity today is in the young people that we get to serve. Okay, that didn't work. Oh, there we go. And so today we get to talk about readiness, about how are we getting our kids ready for school, from the preschool ages into the school age component. Not just talking about what happens to them when they're 3 years old, and that's, quote, the time that they enter our preschools, but also what happens before that, right? And then after preschool, and they enter our schools, when they hit that K-12 system, and what happens to them in those environments? How are we, as parents, as community members, as educators, getting our kids ready? And then how are we getting our schools ready? So when I thought about this as a mom of 3 young children, I thought, well, what are the things that are important to me? What is something I think is important for all kids? And where I kind of landed were on 3 key components. One is around language, not just verbal language, body language, written language, and recognizing that the importance of words, the importance of interactions with our young people is so, so very key. It's so, so very valuable. Because if we don't do that, if we don't interact with people, if we don't give that opportunity, then right there, walls start to come up. The next piece is play, right? Let them get dirty. Let them roll around, right? Let them explore. Because if they don't have that opportunity, then how are they going to learn the do's and the don'ts? And the last, that's my little girl right there. That's my baby Kate. And there she is with the opportunity to have book in front of her. Not all kids get that, right? But if they could, if we could give them the chance, right, to be putting literature in front of them, reading to them, going back to that language, giving them something tactile to touch, to play with, to explore. It is so much what they need to help build that foundation. Now, what about our schools? I had a tough time trying to think of a visual, and I just went to the old school traditional red schoolhouse, right, yellow school bus, which it really is not what we see in our schools today. I had the chance over the last week and a half to visit a number of classrooms and seeing that kids are standing up learning, sitting in couches lounging, sitting on these wobbly chairs, right? Having kickstands, right, so that we recognize they need to move. I need to move. I can't sit down. I look at the people that I get to work with and they see me all the time moving around. That's what our kids need. So how are we getting our schools ready? Yeah, we're training, but what are we training on? What do we need to be training on? Around engagement, cultural competency, connectedness. How are we connecting with not only our kids, but their parents, the guardians, the agencies, the service providers? Because really, we get the luxury, we in the schools get the luxury of serving kids for 6 hours, 180 days a year. That's what we get, right? But there are 360 days in a year. There are 24 hours in a day. So there's a lot more to it. And so what can we do with all that we have? Our resources, right? I just mentioned the desks, the standing desks, the lounging chairs, the intentionality around the way in which we teach. Don't teach or don't give something just to give it, but have something behind that. What does that mean? Why is that important? And that's the key for our teachers, right? And as I mentioned before, but really the connectedness and the interactions. You know, I think about the days when I got to be a teacher and I got to stand at the door and greet the students that entered my classroom at the old Bahia Vista. And I remember looking at them and just saying, "Good morning, boys and girls, it's gonna be a great day." And then I got the opportunity to be a principal at Olive School in Novato. And you could find me every morning up on that blacktop, greeting the kids as they got off the bus, greeting the parents as they walked their child to school. Because that connectedness, that's what makes them want to be there. That's what makes them engaged. I lost my clicker. So, what are we doing today? Well, today we're just bringing together some of our experts, some that are going to get to share with you some of the knowledge that they have. But please know, they are just some of the experts. You all are experts too. You all that get to work with our kids, our parents, they're experts in different areas for sure. But today we're going to get to hear from Kelly Tharp from Community Action Marin. She'll be talking about the child development indicators, right? Josephine Jolie from Mills College will be speaking to us about early childhood education settings and experiences. That environment is so key. Because if it's not an environment that kids are ready or can learn in, then it's all for nothing. And last but not least, Lori Hewitt, representing the San Rafael City Schools, and in collaboration with the work that she gets to do around the pre-K through third initiative that's supported through the Marin Community Foundation. So they'll share some background, some information that they have. We'll get the opportunity to answer some questions that you may have. But what's next for us? Well, it's preschool. Then it's kindergarten and beyond. And that little girl, that's my baby Kate. That's that same baby you saw way back when, right? In the first couple slides. And she can't wait. Look at that smile. She cannot wait for preschool to start for her. And that little boy, that's my Adam. That's my middle child. And he's got his carnation and he's got opportunity in front of him. And each and every one of our kids in this county and beyond this county have those opportunities. They have those smiles. It's contingent upon us to be sure that we are providing them the best environment that they can learn in, the strongest foundation that they can thrive in, because we want to be sure that they get the opportunity of creativity, of challenges, of successes, of failures, of joy, and of learning. And right there, those are my three. Right? There's baby Kate, playing, talking to her brothers. There's the big brother. He's now 10 in 5th grade. And there's my Adam in the middle. All three very different children. And I'm fortunate that I'm able to give them opportunities. But I've had to lean on people to help me give them that. And so today, from some of our experts, we'll hear more about that. But I want us to go ahead and begin and really think about what can we do for the future of our tomorrow right there. Okay?
How do I click it? Good morning. So again, I'm Kelly Tharp. And when I was asked to speak around indicators in child development aspects of school readiness, I came up with a couple of ideas that speak to me and that are important to me. And one of the things I wanted to start with was Most Likely to Succeed. It's a textbook that I've been reading in class. I'm also a student. So I'm a mother, I'm a student, I'm an adjunct lecturer. And I teach in early childhood education. One of the things that we've been speaking about is just what does school look like and how much it's changed or not changed, right? And I don't know how many of you are familiar with Most Likely to Succeed, but there's a lot that we can do different, right? In terms of innovative thinking, inquiry-based instruction, and just really allowing the child for their uniqueness to come through in everyday actions and interactions that they have in the classroom. And how do we honor and respect that? So I wanted to start with that just because that is something I want to consider moving forward. Uh-oh. Should I aim it somewhere? Oh, sorry. Let's go back. Okay. But I want to first have us think about and ponder this quote by Bruce Perry. So if I can just take a second and let you read it. Sure. Sorry. Okay. Or unless someone wants to read it, would anyone else like to read? Would you like to read it? Sure, Laura? Bio?
Good morning, everybody. So, one of my favorite people in the world, Dr. Bruce Perry. Childhood experiences create the person. These organizing childhood experiences can result in flexible, responsible, empathetic, and creative adults, or impulsive, aggressive, remorseless, and antisocial individuals. Early child is not a passive time. It is, in fact, the most crucial time in the life of an individual, and therefore, in the life of society.
And we kind of agree with that maybe, right? But not often do we see the value in early childhood education. And so when I came today and thinking about what I wanted to share, I wanted to really emphasize the importance of that. Because when we don't do that, then we see different changes manifest themselves that aren't necessarily in a positive space. And so I think we really need to be reminded of that it really is crucial, important time that really sets the foundation for everything else a child does, everything else the human does. So I just wanted us to think about Bruce Perry in this moving forward. And brain development. I apologize for that little those additional letters in there, but brain development. I wanted us to pause and really think about it. And sorry if you can't read the first, but it says that at birth, the average baby's brain is about a quarter the size of the average adult brain. Is that what it says? And then it doubles in size in the first year. It keeps growing until about 80% of the brain by the time the child is 3, which is crazy, right? So much is going on and so much that we can be doing differently to support that development. And then, of course, it states that by the age 3, it's 90% and nearly fully grown by age 5. So what are we doing in these classrooms? What are we doing on these day-to-day interactions with children as the adults in their space? How are we facilitating their development? A newborn has all of the brain cells, neurons, for the rest of their life, which is crazy. Which means there's a lot of activity constantly taking place and happening, right? And the more that we're able to support that development, support those interactions, support those experiences, the more that we're creating those synapses, right? The more that we're developing and supporting the synapses, the myelination to make it a permanent something so that these children have something to go into these classroom settings and understand and know what's going on. So we need to be able to appreciate that early childhood education, again, is the foundation for all that we see and experience as early educators or educators throughout the educational journey. At least 1 million new neural connections or synapses are made every second, more than at any other time in life. So again, making sure we're building on concepts, foundations that we've already exposed the child to is how the children continue to learn and make sense and build those permanent connections within their brain. So I just wanted to provide that. Sorry, there was an image of a brain. It kind of got lost somewhere. But just as a reminder, right, we know that the brain develops backwards, forwards, so being mindful of how that looks in the classroom when we have certain expectations, because it really is about developmentally appropriate practices. And that's kind of what I'm also here to speak about. So the brain development, the way it develops, how we can make a difference, and then the way the brain is growing, so are we interacting and engaging and expecting out of our children in the classroom, making sure that they're able to master what's appropriate for them, and not setting them up for failure, right? Setting them up for situations that's not appropriate for their age. So that's just a reminder. And then this too, and this is a good reminder for me. I've got 2 daughters that are both in college, 20 and 19, and I have to remind myself that the brain is still making changes all the way up until age 25, right? It's still growing and developing. It doesn't just stop at 5. at the 90% stage. But we, in fact, are still making changes. So this is just another indicator. This came from Ross Thompson, a presentation by Ross Thompson, looking at just the fact that so much is happening, even with the pruning situation, but just in terms of growth and development for the brain throughout life. So this one just shows that, again, architecture is built over time. So it's something that we need to think about throughout their years. And again, in early childhood education, appreciating those aspects, that time of development, and those years. Early years matter because interactions of early experience and gene expression shape the nature, architecture of the brain. We are actually growing brains in early childhood education level. We're actually creating the architecture that is going to be later used and utilized and necessary for further learning in education. And so these are just some bullet reminders of those important facts. Whether positive or negative, we see the second bullet kind of reminds me again of Bruce Perry in terms of trauma, the effects of trauma. Whether positive or negative, these experiences that these children are having are shaping the brain. However, based on accountability measures that we have had ever since No Child Left Behind and now replaced with ESSA, there's been a lot of pressure in classrooms to do things differently than what we know is developmentally appropriate, than what we know that it takes for the brain to fully develop at its capacity in the way that it should. We're doing things much differently in the classroom. And I say this speaking as not only as I had ran my own program as a preschool teacher, infant teacher, and now as I shared as a higher learning lecturer, I hear about what's going in the classroom. I see the demands that are placed on us as educators by parents even, right? They want to compete, they want their children to be ready for school, and what does that look like? So a lot of things are happening in the classroom that aren't necessarily developmentally appropriate, but are definitely as a result of some of the accountability measures that are out there. And so what we're seeing more so in the classroom now is that we're promoting academics. We're looking for academic results. We're trying to measure up around kindergarten in preschool. And I know that many of us as educators, there is a lot of frustration there when we know that we want to do things differently, but we know that we've got expectations placed on us. So just being reminded that there is some history there as to why things are happening the way they are. So that's just another reason why we are having the pressure of academics in classroom. That's not necessarily the appropriate behavior, but it's in fact a part of our historic expectations. The demands of today's teachers require that teachers' methods of the past 2 centuries, such as memorization, be replaced by innovation, application, and transfer, which is really unfortunate. This is somewhat what Raquel spoke about in terms of allowing their children to wander and to be innovative or creative in their thinking, just to play. This takes away from a lot of that, right? We're not allowing our children, if we're taking away a lot of these aspects of their necessary development and exploration, then we're really taking away the opportunity for them to be innovative and be their full potential. So with the new law, though, we have to really be mindful because, as a result, we're seeing a lot of changes in behavior in children, right? There's a lot more challenging behavior in the classroom. And again, I'm just speaking from the preschool arena. There's a lot more children that are coming through that we're sending out of the classroom because they have just undesirable behaviors. And we're calling them to go for, I don't know, what do you call it, early childhood early intervention. We're telling their parents to pick them up. They're not responding in classroom. They're not doing as expected, as needed to be. And so because of that, we're expelling a lot more children. And expelling and suspending is the same thing in preschool, the same verbiage that we use in higher or primary education and secondary education. It's the same language. every time we call a parent to remove a child, every time we remove the child out of the classroom, those are forms of suspensions and expulsions. And that's a problem. And we in preschool level do it way more than they do in K through higher ed, higher learning education. So with the new law, that is the AB 752 that was signed in 2018, we have to really be mindful. Because what we're finding is, and I'll get to some of the research that was conducted, is what we're finding is that a lot of the expulsions that we're seeing is on black and brown children. And boys. And so there's a problem that we do need to address. And that law was put in place to ensure that we're more mindful of our actions. If you have any questions, you can please let me know at any point, okay? Or comments. And so when we look at how this affects, though, moving into kindergarten or moving into school primary grades, these are directly from the California indicators, measures of accountability, for those of you that need that connection, right? Yes? So there was a Dr. Gilliam study that was done, a Yale study, and that's one of many that you can find more information on. Good morning, Elisa. Hi. The pressure to be ready, or what that means for certain individuals, the pressure to be ready. And so, sure. The question was, am I saying that the reason for the challenging behavior is due to the increase in the pressure to be ready? So I'm working on my dissertation, and that's one of the things I'm looking at is developmentally appropriate practices in preschool. And one of the concerns that comes out of the pressure for immature or inappropriate academic expectations for 3s and 4s is in fact, yes, affecting their behavior. That's not the only indicator. There are true situations and needs of children for additional special attention. But for certain, if we're putting children in predicaments and circumstances and situations and they're not even able to measure up, there is going to be a result or a manifestation of some sort in that child's behavior in the classroom. And it looks in like so many different ways to us, but that is for certain one of the reasons. So there's been an increase in that, and then an increase in children with challenging behaviors. Yes?
What does that law say that you were just in a slide prior?
Yes.
What is that?
So it was a recent law signed by Governor Brown, and it states that basically we have to be more mindful of those children that we're suspending and expelling, thank you. Yes?
One of the issues that's come up from time to time, not only in this county, I would say across the state, across the nation, is the disciplinary action that's put upon children based on their behavior in a classroom setting. Whether that's in a preschool classroom setting, whether that's in a K-12 classroom setting. And the reality is, yeah, kids are acting different today than they did 10 years ago. We're responding differently. But what I was speaking about earlier, and as well as what Kelly's speaking about, is the importance of knowing that we get the opportunity to serve the children that cross a threshold in our classrooms, we as educators. And so it's contingent upon us to acknowledge that and to think about our practices and be sure that our practices are the appropriate practices to meet their needs. We don't get to pick and choose. We don't get to say, yeah, I want to serve you, I don't want to serve you. Right? We get to serve every single child that crosses that threshold into our classrooms. And so we want them to be successful because, as one of the earlier quotes talked about, is what do we want for this society? Right? What do we want for our young people? And that means we're going to have to change practices. That means when we look at the education that we're providing, we're doing it with full-on intentionality. We're setting up a culture of caring in our classrooms. We're connecting with our families. Because if we're not doing that work, then we're not doing the right work, right? So I think, we can fall down a rabbit hole and talk about, yes, the data is showing, are there kids of color that may be disciplined in a different way or more increased than others? That may very well be true. And it's important that we call that out and that we really do something different about it. And we reflect on our practices and say, we're going to change the way in which we get to serve these kids. Because we do, as I said earlier, we do get them in the K-12 system for 6 hours, 180 days a year. And they get the right to sit in those chairs, and they get in the right to learn, right? And so it's hard work, but it's work that we all signed up to do as educators. And so I think that's kind of a little bit of what you're trying to talk about. And it starts early on in the preschool environment. And so it's just important that we're setting up environments that are conducive for their learning. Yeah.
Raquel, thank you. So what are we doing differently in our schools?
We are going to have a Q&A at the end. I will write that question down so we can go back to it.
Okay. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the next slide. And then Bonnie will allow you to speak. Yes? So these are just the indicators and where the measures come from in terms of accountability in the classroom, and why I looked at suspensions and expulsions, or suspensions and expulsions because it does affect attendance. And attendance is a huge element in having our children learn, right? Being in the classroom to really learn and gain from the experience, a schooling experience. So these are important indicators. So here's the Yale study with Dr. Gilliam. Actually, I apologize, that's Dr. Gilliam. And then this is a more recent civil rights data collection that came out that just talks about how excessive it has been in terms of suspensions and expulsions in the preschool level. And that's what I really wanted to address, is that we do have to do things differently. And then there's some of the data that was collected. This comes from the California Department of Education, and you can look at those a little bit. And so we're more than 3 times more likely to expel and suspend our children in preschool than kindergarten. Okay, I'm going to move on. And then this is just a graph that just kind of gives us another visual of that same data, of some of that same data, just so that we can see it from a different vantage point, but it's the same information. So there are some definite concerns there. And so we want to make sure, especially for low-income families, children from low-income families, and that's the families that we serve primarily with Community Action Marin. So those are concerns that we have in terms of absenteeism, and how do we get them in the classroom? How do we support them and parents and teachers in keeping these children, or supporting those that need additional assistance because of barriers? How do we keep them in the classroom? And so this is just some more communication around the challenges that they're experiencing, and the challenges and things that we need to think about and consider when we're working with families and parents. Because we know that chronic absenteeism is about 10% of the time, that's only 18 days a year. And when you think about some of these children that we're sending out of the classroom or that are absent for whatever reason, that's only 18 days in 180 days of a school year period, which is considered chronic. That's 10%. So that's not a lot of time, but that's a significant difference and makes a difference in their learning opportunities, right? So we want to be mindful of that. And so what that means is, the other indicator that I wanted to address or focus on was just parent and educators working together. I mean, there are solutions, there is support and ways to make a difference. And that's really around, and that's part of what my dissertation speaks about, is the component and the stakeholder of the parent, right? And that relationship. Because it's difficult as educators, we do all that we can, we try to support as much as we think we are, and addressing the issues, but without the relationship, without really parents being as engaged and as a strong partner in high quality relationships, then we're really not hitting the right spaces, right? We're not hitting the markers as we think we are. So this is just a reminder that parents and educators need to be working together, and for different reasons, right? That responsibility is shared, that responsibility relies on each other, it needs to be a trusting, collaborative circumstance if we really do want to address the cultural issues of that family, which are unique to that family, and again, to address barriers. And so just in closing, again, it really is about engaging parents as education advisors. And that's something that, again, with Community Action Marin that we're working with on some of our site, with our site supervisors, is a parent advisory council. some ways to get parents to come in to really appreciate and understand what their needs are and not making any more assumptions, because we really want to address those issues of suspensions and expulsions and absenteeism, brain development, appropriate brain development. It all is a part of the same when we know what parents' needs are and what the family's conditions are. And so having parents as advisors to really give us the strong feedback that we need to hear about how things are going is really necessary. So we are doing those things to ensure that we really are looking at these indicators that I've chosen to speak about today in hopes to make a difference, a true difference in the needs of the child. And so I just wanted to leave with this quote. And this is Tom Wagner, the author of the book, the very first slide that I did on Most Likely to Succeed. And it reads, capacity to innovate, the ability to solve problems creatively or bring new possibilities to life, and skills like critical thinking, communication, and collaboration are far more important than academic knowledge. Because if we're really thinking about preparing our children for the 21st century and innovative thinking out of the box, problem solving, then we really need to move away from some of the strict, rigid ways of thinking, one linear ways of considering a possible solution to things, and allow children to really grow to be their fullest potential. Thank you.
Thank you. Please welcome Toby from the Mills College School of Education. Good morning, everybody. Sorry for that little glitch, but we can move ahead. So we live in an era of readiness, and it has become one of the key constructs for early childhood educators in this 21st century in which we live. When we're thinking about readiness, we are often consumed with thinking about skill sets and competencies. And we're thinking about these things, especially as children move towards their first day of kindergarten. And I think this is oftentimes very stressful for teachers as well as parents, because everybody wants the children to be ready. Oftentimes, the focus for early childhood educators is on really having children ready in topics such as math, science, and literacy. And in the last few years, there's been a much bigger emphasis on having children ready with regards to their social and emotional skills too. One of the things that I would be advocating for as an early childhood educator is that we are always thinking about the whole child. We don't have these compartmentalized pieces to our brains. Children develop differently. They take their own pace. They take their own path. And as early childhood educators, we are here to support and guide the children. One of the things that I think gets really overlooked when we're talking about readiness is what kind of dispositions do we really want children to have to be productive citizens in a 21st century democracy. And at this moment in time, we are still living in a democracy. And one of the things that I feel that we need to be really working hard to do is to make sure that our next generations understands the power of a democracy and what it brings to us, which is the ability to have freedom of thought and to think critically and to be curious and creative and to also be competent in working and playing and thinking with children and people in general who are different than they are. The children who come from different contexts and have different values and beliefs. Our job is to raise children who feel comfortable and competent thinking and working and playing these ways with one another. So we have a very short program here. But one of the things I'm going to do is to show you 3 vignettes of children learning and thinking and playing and collaborating with one another in classrooms. But before we get to those, one of the things that I would like to say is that in my work with children for the last 25 years, the most important thing about my work with children has always been the relationships that we create in the classroom. And those relationships speak to our work with families first, with the families who bring their children to school every morning, no matter who that person is. And that we also are thinking about our own relationships with the children that they bring to our classrooms, and that we're also thinking about the ways that we support children's interactions with one another. Erik Erikson said that the foundation of any learning is the trust that children have with their teachers and other adults and with other children. I believe that to be true. I believe it to be true, as adults, we want to be in an environment where we trust others. And what it enables us to do is to free up our minds and to be able to engage in really honest conversations and fun conversations. So a relationship is always key and always the foundation block to any learning that goes on in the classroom. Lev Vygotsky, who is a great constructivist educator, said that the mind is contagious. So one of the things that we want to make sure about as teachers is that the mindset that we bring into the classroom is the contagious mindset that we want to support and nurture in the classroom. We want children to know that we believe that they are competent and that they are capable of having great ideas. If children feel that they are trusted, they will learn to trust themselves and those that take care of them. So that is my little foundation piece. That is a thing that I think about every single day. How do I build these relationships? Who am I going to build relationships with? And now I'm just going to share with you. Does anyone want me to read these things that I've put up here on the PowerPoint? Yes. All right, I'm just going to read them. So, the most important piece, I forgot can you hear me? Yes. Okay, so the most important piece, relationship orientated, which I've just spoken to, and then we're thinking about an environment that invites active inquiry, exploration, play, problem solving, risk taking, and social interaction. So those would be the things that I would be hoping for and planning for and intentionally creating in any classroom that I choose to work in. And the readiness piece, what I'm expecting that will be an outcome of this is that we will have children who have developed dispositions to learning that include a sense of their own competence, are imaginative, creative, flexible, persistent, and engaged, and motivated learners who can learn independently as well as cooperate and learn from and solve problems with others. So those would be the pieces that I would be thinking about with regards to what readiness looks like. So this is a picture of a little 4-year-old, and one of the reasons I put this picture to begin with is I want you to see his joy. I want you to see that he is interacting actually with water right now, and that the things that these children engage in the experience of water play is quite phenomenal. So what happened, I'm going to sort of tell you a little story about what happened around this. So the teachers had actually seen that the children were very interested in thinking about firefighters. So they actually offered the children these transparent hoses, and they put them out in the yard, which was where most of the firefighting play was happening. And something very interesting happened. The firefighting play actually sort of came to a standstill, and the children became very interested in putting things in the hoses, which I'm sure if you've been in the classroom, you will see a lot of children would have done those kind of things. So they found stuff in the yard, acorns, sand, and then they asked for the water, and what they wanted to keep doing was putting the water through. So the role of the teacher is always to be an observer first, right? Relationship, observation are two critical pieces that we're always thinking about. So the teachers observed this interest, and following that morning session, they went back and they thought about what they could do to help the children to investigate water and the flow of water, more specifically, in a way that would enhance their learning. So they went back and they came up with this idea, which was to make these homemade funnels, to attach these pieces of string and to thread the funnels through and attach the hoses. And then they put the water play and set it up in the classroom, which is always an interesting experience, because oftentimes with water things can get a little messy. But if you're holding your mindset, which is these children are competent and they come up with interesting ideas, then we have to believe that they're going to come up with some really interesting ideas. So within the first few minutes of setting up this activity, there were 4 children at the table. They came up with an idea that they wanted to see, if they poured water in the top, which hose would it come out of first? So these children already came up with a question, right? One of the things that we want children to do is to come up with their own questions. And then we want children to investigate them. And the teacher just observed at this time, because one of the things that we have to be very careful of as teachers is trying to modulate when we ask the first question, right? Sometimes when we ask a question too early, we stop the investigation and we interrupt the flow of their thinking or the passion about the thing that they were interested in investigating. With 4-year-old boys trying to investigate water coming out of 2 hoses, that was a huge investigating question for them. So the teachers observed and they watched the children repeat that investigation over and over and over again. What great scientists do is they keep repeating, right? They keep repeating and they keep observing what's happening. And so the teacher watched them repeat over and over until she finally asked the question, "I wonder what you were trying to find out." You could have 100 different answers from that question. All right, the children were able to articulate because they had had time to really think about what they were doing. And so when they articulated their answer, it was in a beautifully constructed four-year-old sentence. That doesn't mean it's perfect, but they were able to articulate the idea very clearly to the adult and to find consensus from the group, right? They had all decided to do this. So she then said, what the children had found out was that the water always came out of the same hose. And she said, "Well, why do you think that happens? Got any ideas?" And so then the children, showing us that they had really been observing very, very closely, was that they had noticed that and of course, they didn't know the absolute reason, and there's no reason for us to. Right? There are very few absolutes in this world. That one of the hose pipes was thicker than the other, that one of them was shorter than the other, and one of them was more curly. So these were all great observations, all really good variables that we might take into consideration in this experiment that could affect why water comes out of one hose more quickly than the other. So the children at the end of the water play, of course there was lots of water, and one of the responsibilities that if you make a lot of water puddles on the floor, you have to help to clean them up. So they eagerly mopped all of the water up because they really wanted to have some more experiences with this water play tomorrow. And the thing that they asked for was to take the water outside because they wanted to make the length of the hose longer. And so the teacher asked, well, what are some of the ways you think you could do that? And so, of course, they can only come up with things that they know about. So the things that they know about are tape, lots of different kinds of tape. And they wrap tape, and they figured out that, it leaks. And then they had to try a different kind of tape to see if that would help. And then they thought, well, maybe we could put one of the smaller hose inside of the bigger hose. And this was a real mathematical and scientific journey, because they also started to understand that when the hose pipes got flatter, the water flow became interrupted. And so then the teacher asked them another question, which was, I wonder what would happen if you raised the hose pipe a little higher, like you do when you're playing with the ramps in the block area. Because one of the things that we really want children to be able to do is to integrate knowledge that they have already accumulated and be able to transfer that knowledge to a different conceptual idea or using a different material. So many of the pieces to this investigation that the children initiated but the teacher framed helped them to learn many of the competencies that we're hoping children will gain around math and science, which would constitute as readiness. But the most, and I'm not going to say the most important, I'm going to say in the process of doing that, they also got to see themselves as competent. They were also saw themselves as being problem solvers. They were also able to work collaboratively with one another. They came up with great ideas. They had a theory that they put into practice. And these are some of the pieces, the competencies and the dispositions that we really need to be thinking about when we are educating young children for a world where they're going to have to be very flexible, where they're going to have to come up with great ideas, where, oftentimes, I feel right now I can't even think about what our world will look like by the time that the little baby that came to join us today will be trying to work on by the time, he's a 25-year-old. All right, so you probably can't, I don't even know if that writing's come out there. So, can you see the pictures? Okay, I'm really sorry about that. So, this is a learning story. And the learning story takes place in the dramatic play area. And at the top are two little children who are looking at some pictures in a little cubby. And the pictures are of different images of going to the doctors. And then there's a little picture of the children taking care of a little bear. And then there's another picture of a child sitting on a chair and she's writing doctor's notes. So the reason I've included this in here is oftentimes as readiness takes on a very big place in a classroom, we see the end of dramatic play. And I don't know if you still remember when you were a little person, but I remember playing all kinds of dramatic play with many, many different children until at least I was 12 years old. And one of the benefits, there are so many benefits of dramatic play. You can pretty much anything can be integrated into dramatic play. And this is just one little vignette of children incorporating literacy right? The act of playing out a story is literacy. It's about telling your own story. It's about telling a story that has a beginning, a middle, and an end. It's about understanding that you can separate a thought from an action, which really is the basis for every kind of abstract thinking that anybody enters into. So the place of dramatic play, Lev Vygotsky tells us, is the most important area in any classroom setting. And what we should be expecting to see by the children get to be about 3.5 is that they spend a lot of time in there telling their own stories, and that they begin to tell those stories with many other people. So the collaborative piece there, the perspective taking, the subduing of the I, right, as well as the offering of an idea, is a very rich area for children to play. So I'm just going to read to you the little story that happened in here, so that you can, and I'm also going to name 1 or 2 assessment criteria that are being met while these children are engaged in this early literacy experience. So Elaine is 3 years, 11 months, and Candice is 3 years and 8 months, and they engage in symbolic play together, taking on the roles of doctors. The other thing I love about this, right, is that they found space for both of them to be doctors. Not one of them had to be a nurse. It's all very democratic. They consult the pictures I posted around the room while discussing with each other how to take care of their sick bear. Candice tells Elaine, "First we need medicine." Elaine replies, "Here's all kinds. This is a really good one." "You have to bring it to my bear," says Candice. "Let's take her temperature," says Elaine. They work together to care for the bear. And this meets the DRDP measure number 4, which is a social emotional one, collaborating and also being engaged in dramatic play. They remain in character throughout the play. This is a very hard thing to do, right? To suspend I and to take on the role of a doctor. Many times when children come out of dramatic play, they're exhausted, right? Because they've had to put the I away for a moment. So this also is helping children to develop a perspective, right? A perspective and an empathy for the characters that they choose to play. They create a well-sequenced story, so there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. You know, they've decided the bear is sick, they figure out how to take care of him, and the bear makes a full recovery. During their play, Candice picks up one of the clipboards and begins to take doctor's notes. So very intentionally, the role of the teacher is to provide props that are going to support and enhance children's learning. And one of the opportunities that the teachers saw in this episode was the possibility for writing and sharing thoughts. So Candice spends a long time focused period on writing her notes. She demonstrates many emergent writing skills, and these are all things that are in the DRDP assessment, which is an observational assessment. Of course, these are not proper words, all right, but there are signs and signals and marks that mean something, and there are spaces that she creates between her signs and signals and marks. And once she finishes, she tells me her notes. She says, she wants to read them, and she says, it says, children go to the doctor's office because they're sick. They wait in the waiting room, then go to the doctor's office. He checks them out. Then they go home and then get medicine. After they sleep, then they are better. This is a very sophisticated piece of writing that this child has made, and she's not 4. It shows us that she understands a sequence. She understands cause and effect. She believes that she is a writer, that she has a story worth telling, and that story is so important that she needs to share it with somebody. These are critical things for children to learn about why we write. So one of the things that skill sets often don't emphasize for young children is the meaning behind the things that we do. Children need to understand that writing is for communicating, not for communicating big ideas that they have moving around in their head, and for sharing stories and telling their own story. Because as a representation, the story doesn't have to be an exact replica of what actually happens when you go to the doctor. It's actually a representation of what the child thinks happens when you go to a doctor. That's an interesting difference. That means that the child has ownership of it. Does anyone have any questions about anything? Yes? No? Okay, so I'm assuming you won't be able to read this one either. So this is also all of these stories are very sweet. All of these stories take place in very short periods of time, right? Children are showing us their learning every second of the day, and 99% of it teachers will miss. We will miss it. So one of the things that I love about these stories is that they can be shared in many ways. Sometimes we write these stories directly to the child and share it with the child. Sometimes we write these stories and we post them so other people in our community can read the stories about things that children do in the classroom. And all of the time, these stories are entered into their DRDTP portfolios to give a beautiful context along with the assessment piece that we're looking for. All right? And we're also highlighting the dispositions of the children who the teacher sees as competent and capable and a generator of great ideas. Okay, so this little guy came to the classroom every morning, and he had a very long journey that he made on the bus with his mum. And when he came to school, he would build a road that took him, and he had a school bus, and he'd take the school bus and he'd put people on it, and he would go underneath the tables, and he'd crawl under there pushing his bus, and the bus would go all the way from his house in San Francisco to the school in Oakland. And this is what he spent most of his time doing. And one of the things that we were trying to do is to think about how could we engage him in another activity that would also be as satisfying to him and to help him to revisit that home, which I think he missed desperately in the first few months of school. So the teacher decided to create an activity where she built some little houses out of milk cartons, and then she sprayed them with blackboard chalk, and they had little doors that could open. And her focus really was creating an interesting activity where children could engage in counting and one-to-one correspondence. And this little boy, the moment he came in, he looked at the house that she made and he said, "I do not live in a house like that. I live in an apartment." And so immediately he was just, I'm not even going to look at that thing because it doesn't have anything to do with me. So the teacher went home and she built some apartments with the milk cartons. And then she brought them back to school the next day. And the first thing that he did, without saying anything, was to look at the table. And when he saw that there were apartments there, he went. He didn't go to get his school bus. he went to the table. And one of the things that he used to like to take on the school bus were these kitty cats. And he has a cat at his house. And the teacher had put the kitty cats by the apartment block. And so he took the kitty cats and he opened the door and he put a kitty cat in each door. So I'm just going to read you the story. So as soon as Stephen entered the classroom, he went to the new apartment building and began exploring with interest. Interest is critical to learning. He selected 6 cats, a favourite animal, out of a tray of small animal manipulatives. So he picked those things out because he really liked them. There is an apartment for every cat, he says. So even without really opening the doors yet, he's already telling us that he has a pretty good understanding of number conservation, right? We didn't know this about this child. So then he says, so there is an apartment for every cat, he says, as he places one cat into each apartment and carefully shuts each door. I observe as he repeats the action over and over before asking, right? Because we're never quite sure, so we've got to take that moment to simply observe and to wonder. And then I ask the question, if there is one cat in each apartment, what number should we write on the apartment building? And he says, 1. Like, what's the matter with you? And he's eager. He picks up the chalk that the teacher has also put there with the setup, and he writes numeral 1s on every single door. So he is telling us that, he really, really does understand this one-to-one correspondence. 1 apartment, 1 cat, number 1. And so then she says, and how can we figure out how many cats live in the whole apartment building? So this is another great challenge. Right? She's not saying, I want you to count out 6 cats. That's not how this is being asked. She's taking his lead and she's wondering, how can we find this out? And he immediately offers a strategy. We can count the 1s on the doors. This child has a really strong mathematical understanding. Right? And what he's also telling us is, so he says 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and the last number that you count, the cardinality principle, right? The last number that you count of anything that you count gives you the total. That means we have 6. Cardinality is also one of those readiness skills that people are always wondering about, right? You ask children to put 5 counters in, on the red circle, 5 red bears on the red circle, how many do you have? If a child is able to count, most children will count the 5 cats again, even if they counted the 5 cats to put in the circle. And they do that because they don't understand yet that the last thing that you count gives you the total of what you are counting. These are things that teachers can observe in play. And that when we set things up in a classroom for children with that kind of intentionality, disposition, right, competence, that child feels very competent. There's no question in his head, right? A reflection to the teacher, to the child could be, you did a lot of work thinking about numbers, right? And he did a lot of work. I'm not going to tell this one because I think I've gone past my time, but I want to end with this one. I'm not going to tell you a story. This is just an image. These are toddlers, and I know at the beginning, Raquel, you talked that we're not just beginning at age 3 here, we're thinking about tiny children. One of the things that I want for my infants and toddlers is that they can run along that bench and jump into this world. That they have the confidence, that they have the skills, and they believe that this world is a joyful place. That is the image that I would like to leave you with for today. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. I had a childhood flashback of dramatic play. I used to play Batman and Robin with my friend down the street, Eric Theodore, and until I got really sick of being Robin all the time. So we switched to Superman, and there were 2 Supermen in our world. So we've gone from the conceptual, and now we want to go to the practical and hear about what's happening in San Rafael City Schools on the pre-K to 3 situation, and glad to welcome Lori Hewitt. Thank you.
Hello. Hi, everyone. Again, my name's Lori Hewitt, and I'm going to be telling you about how San Rafael City Schools supports early childhood development and beyond. So again, I coordinate and support all pre-K through 3rd grade initiatives throughout the district, focusing mainly on San Pedro, Bahia Vista, and Venetia Valley elementary schools. I work closely with our state preschool staff, really ensuring that we have a high quality program. I also work directly with administration, coaches, and teachers to support pre-K through 3rd grade systems and alignment as it pertains to vision, positive school climate, alignment and data analysis, high quality teaching, academic intervention, and family engagement. So first, I will touch upon the ways that San Rafael City Schools supports collaborative inquiry and collective learning. And these were the 3 little buckets. First is structured meetings. So in San Rafael, among other districts as well, we have monthly district grade level meetings. And that's when grade levels get together to support alignment and professional development. Staff meetings are held as well to align school systems. PLCs, also known as professional learning communities, are held and used for data analysis, and this is every Wednesday. The data informs instructional practices and provides opportunities to share those best practices and instructional tools. Leadership teams on site meet regularly as well to plan structures as well as distribute leadership, very important piece in the school community. Opportunities to share best practices was another area I wanted to touch upon, and teacher collaboration and planning time is extremely important. And we have pre-K through kindergarten meetings where they have ample time to share and align strategies. We have elementary teachers also meeting with preschool teachers as well. They meet monthly to share practices and connect. Teacher and peer observation time is something that also occurs where there's those connections and aligning math and literacy strategies within grade levels, but also above and below. So we have some vertical articulation as well as horizontal articulation between the grade levels. And then they get to debrief and discuss the celebrations of success as well as enhancements to their practice. Gallery walks, which is something that I'll touch upon in a moment with professional development, but it's a SEAL component. At the end of the SEAL units, they have these gallery walks in the classrooms. It invites parents in, but also I wanted to touch upon how teachers are also going from school sites within the district to also then, again, see what's happening in the classrooms. The gallery walks show the whole unit in the classroom, and they're again able to share practices and visit with each other. I hope you're hearing like a common theme of just really collaborating and sharing. And then also there's the instructional piece. So in San Rafael City Schools, we have instructional coaches at each site working to support alignment and curriculum development and elevate teaching and learning practices. The professional development that San Rafael is focusing on is SEAL, and SEAL stands for Sobrato Early Academic Language. And it's a group of strategies that develop the language, literacy, and academic skills of children, especially young ELs. The strategies connect to other curriculum like social studies, science, social emotional development, and it builds the oral language and vocabulary development found in early academic literacy. Another focus is math and writing, and there's high quality professional development that the teachers are also experiencing with math and writing. The last thing I want to touch upon is the trainer of trainer model, and that's really, and it's a model for alignment and curriculum, instruction and assessment. Teachers attend professional development, but then they are the trainers at their school site. So they get the professional development and they come back to their sites, part of this distributive leadership piece. They will then present about the information and support. High quality professional development at San Rafael aligns Common Core standards and is research based. So all of these, again, create a sustainable system of support that promotes teacher effectiveness. So again, really that systemness and creating systems within the school sites as well as the district. So this was also touched upon, but the importance of community building and really the family engagement piece. These are just some of the areas that I wanted to highlight about how we engage our families and how we build the community. San Rafael City Schools strives to create this sense of belonging for children and families and values those important pieces of partnerships through building relationships. And that was a word that we've heard a lot today, and just that relationship building piece with our community, with our partners, with our parents, as well as in the classroom, and those relationships within the classroom with the students, making connections with families and schools. We recognize that a sense of belonging and academic achievement are connected. Community liaisons are at each site, along with family center staff that provide health, training, social, and nutritional supports. Parent workshops and parent leaderships are crucial components to family engagement. My School in Motion at school sites is a space for students, staff, parents to celebrate community. Seal Gallery walks, again, as I had said, that is a piece of our professional development and strategies that are throughout the district at school sites. The Seal Gallery walks are like a culmination of each unit, are held regularly for parents to come and see their students learning, and to have them learn with the family and really deepening that cultural identity. Kinder Readiness. These are how San Rafael City Schools prepare students for kindergarten. We have 2 state preschool programs, as well as 4 TK classrooms with systems that provide students the supports that they need. As stated earlier, SEAL provides thematic-based units with English language development embedded strategies that support language and literacy learning. Balanced literacy includes interactive read-alouds, shared reading, mini lessons, independence, conferencing, and guided approaches. Social emotional growth is emphasized with cultural responsive classrooms. Pre-K alignment focus areas are on foundational skills, instructional alignment, assessments, literacy, and social emotional development. San Rafael also has summer programs that support students, as well as kindergarten assessment day that ensure students receive the supports that they need when they arrive. Intervention systems like RTI, as a response to intervention, is an academic intervention used to provide early, systematic, and appropriate intensive assistance to students, and is tailored to the academic support system. So lots of different systems that are in San Rafael to support students as they continue on in their education. Bless you. Kinder Readiness is also a piece I just wanted to touch upon. It's a Kinder card. And it's used to pass important information to the next teacher, in this case, the kindergarten teacher. And it's another phrase is pass the baton. And really just transferring the information from teacher to teacher about the students and understanding where they are. And so these are some of the areas that are addressed on the Kinder card. And it's really to understand their incoming students' needs and what strategies are needed to meet them where they are. And really supporting their differences. And so these are just some of the areas that are touched upon. In kindergarten, for English language arts, we have an EL scope and sequence, and it maps out the entire year for teachers, aligning grade levels. There's a balanced literacy approach, which is used to differentiate instruction with leveled reading, stressing all success for students. Understanding that writing begins with pictures. And telling a story through a picture is encouraged. Capturing small moments is emphasized, and the power of providing feedback. Reading and writing workshops are in the classroom to create classroom environment that supports all learners. In math, a mathematic focus on mathematical reasoning. Intentional, meaningful discourse. Discourse is when students are talking. Classrooms are full of language and talking and oral language between each other. The power of struggling through a problem. Focusing on the process, not the answer. Thinking metacognitively with a risk-free environment with embedded curriculum. Students participate in movement activities like recess, PE, and Heads Up Foundation supports pre-K through 5th grade music. So students are exposed to many different components. And again, that SEAL provides academic content vocabulary and the importance of student communication with a focus of language development. Kinder has access to everything all the other grades do. San Rafael City Schools has a full-day kindergarten, and it maximizes the benefits of a strong full-day kindergarten to then align with 1st through 3rd and beyond. And the last piece that I wanted to touch upon is really the transition to other grade levels, and knowing that it's the same. Transitioning to kinder is the same as 1st grade and beyond. When you have school-wide systems that are in place for all students, you practice a system of self-regulation that are supported pre-K through 5. Instructional coaches continue to support and align curriculum development pre-K 5. Pass the baton systems are in place for every grade level so that next year's teacher understands his or her student. Student goal setting provides students with the opportunity to understand where they are and how they can set their own learning goals. And lastly, all sites have data analysis structures and use that data to drive instructional practices. So again, I can't stress enough the systems and how important the systems are in the district as well as the school sites. Thank you.
Okay, so now's a chance to respond to some questions. We're going to have our 3 speakers come on up. And I was taking some notes, and I'm going to kind of start us off just keying off of what Lori was just talking about. Specifically, you heard her speak to what San Rafael City Schools is doing. But as I mentioned in the start of our time here together, I get the opportunity of working across our county, right? And so I get to see what's happening in many of our other districts. We have 18 districts here in Marin County, and they are we have some unified, we have very small K-8 districts, we've got some unique situations where in San Rafael, for example, you've got a elementary and a high school district with one board. But what I want to call out is something that I've been able to see as a common thread is something that's happening amongst all of those districts. And Lori touched on it, but the first I would say is around building capacity and acknowledging that we have people that are experts that are working inside of our classrooms and also agencies that are working on behalf of children and families as well. And so really trying to formulate more collaboration that's happening between the two sources so that we can have the best well-rounded impact on the students that we get to serve. So that's one shift that I've seen happen over time. Another is calling out and acknowledging the need for some robust professional development and training around cultural competency. Our districts are approaching it differently with different agencies, but it is something that is a very significant thread that's happening in terms of being sure that our staff, all levels of staff, from site administrators, classified support staff, teachers in the classroom, that they are participating in very intentional professional development that helps them be reflective on being more aware of the students that we get to serve, right? What are some of the biases that they may not realize that they have as they open the doors for the kids that they get to serve? Which touches on the question that came up, what are we doing about some of the disciplinary the disciplinary situations that have happened in our community, meaning why are the children of color more likely to be suspended or expelled or given some disciplinary infractions? And I think that right now, by doing some inside-outside work with our staff and being reflective on why are we responding the way we are, we're able to hopefully over time see a shift happen. Because what will not only happen the way in which we respond to students that we get to serve, whatever they're faced with, but our environments will shift. Because if we're not setting up environments that are truly conducive for the students that we serve, then as I mentioned before, it's really all for nothing, right? We can have the best, the most engaging curriculum, but if it's in an environment where it's not really meeting the needs of the kids that are entering our classrooms today, then we're not really doing the job that we should be doing. And that really is everybody collectively having that conversation, right? So as I mentioned, our educators get the opportunity to serve the students, but we also have many service agencies and the parents too that we get to work with, and the opportunity of hearing from them and engaging with them about what are some of their needs, what's happening in their homes that we can be supportive of. So with that said, we're going to go ahead and start to take some questions from the crowd, and I will be leaning on some of our experts that I have here as well. So first question. Yeah.
In terms of cultural competency, have any of you explored how project-based learning can be used in the classroom here in Marin County? I have 3 kids who've gone through the school system or who are going through it and still see the packets and the worksheets and hear a lot about that style of teaching, and I'm just curious if you've explored that.
So currently I coach with the Marin County Office of Education. So I have 5 classrooms that I work with. And one of the things that we really are, investigating is how do we engage in project work with children? And in some of the classrooms now, project work is not only more interesting for the children, but it's also more interesting for the teachers because they are engaged in this process of reflecting about the work that the children do and reflecting with the children about the work that they're doing and thinking together about how, what could we do next to investigate this further. So I would say yes, one of the one of the goals of the Marin County Offices of Education with their coaches is to engage in project work with children in preschool. And, you know, I've had this experience of being able to do that with children ever since I started teaching. And it's just amazing what children will teach us. And of course, that also brings the relationship in the classroom into a very different balance. I'm not saying that the children have all the control, but they have a voice. And I think that's so important to young children to know that their ideas are heard and thought about, you know, with some gravity.
Hi, I'd love to have you respond to a couple of things that I've experienced and friends with kindergartens in the county in 2 different districts. One is the learning strategy that the teachers call centers, which to us preschool people means, you know, the dramatic play center, the art center, the science center, and so forth. But in these 2 kindergartens, the centers are tables where children sit and do paperwork, and they move from table to table. I volunteered in I'm lucky enough to have 2 great-grandsons who go to school here in the county, and the one was 7 years ago. I volunteered, and I found myself helping out with these centers. I couldn't tell you how boring they were and how bored the children were. And I'd like to know the pedagogy behind the decision to do that have that as a teaching strategy in a kindergarten. And the other thing was from 2 friends who had kindergartners in 2 different districts. Both of them were told that their children might have to repeat kindergarten because of some academic delay. Either they didn't get phonics or something like that. And all of us know the range of development in children, say, 3 to 7, and how these schools could not be ready to take children who did not meet some kind of academic standard in a kindergarten. I'd love your response to these 2 issues.
No pressure. Well, when I think of the center question and centers in kindergarten and how it looks very different, well, the term centers is used differently in kindergarten versus preschool. When I think of those centers, I think of teachers and just my reasoning behind why it would look that way in kindergarten is for teachers to have the opportunities to meet with small groups and do small group instruction. And that is the way some of the teachers have chosen to have structures in their classroom. Having said that, being involved with the pre-K through 3rd grade initiative and the professional development that teachers in San Rafael are experiencing, it involves that question, like, what is centers? Is that centers? Because it looks different in pre-K versus K. So having those conversations about what it looks like and then shifting practices. So I think we're getting there to where we can make some of those changes in the kindergarten classroom and to have that centers be more aligned with pre-K. And then, did you want to touch on that?
And I just want to say, I had the good fortune of being in some kindergarten classrooms this past week, and I'll tell you, I did not see a whole lot of kids sitting at tables writing. So just for you to know, I mean, I'm not sure what's happening everywhere, but I did see a lot of dramatic play. I did see some gingerbread men that they were searching for throughout the campus. So please know that it is going to look different everywhere you go. But I feel confident in saying that our primary age teachers or primary grade teachers are well aware of the importance of hands-on experiential learning for our students. And so I'm proud of that and hope to continue to carry the message. So those that are learning it and getting more used to that exploration opportunity will think about ways in which they can shift their instruction. Around promotion and retention, kindergarten is not a required grade level, right? So it is something that we get to offer in our public schools, and there are standards aligned with it. And we know that kids are coming to us at so many, learning at such different rates and such a different developmental span. So I am not a proponent of retention. I don't believe necessarily that it is the right thing to do, but I have been one to retain a child because it was a unique situation with that child. So my feedback for that parent or those two friends would be to say, ask more questions. Why? What is it that they have identified about that child? Is it on the social emotional side, or is it truly on the academic side? Is it about their gross motor, their fine motor abilities? So what is it about the interest in the school on retaining the child? So I think it's more opportunities to engage in conversation before some of those decisions get made just automatically because they didn't know X number of letters by X date of time of the school year. So it's just more conversation. And I think the empowerment that's happening across this county with parents and helping them understand better that they really can be the voice for their children. I always say parents are their children's biggest advocate, right? And so if they have a question or if they have a concern or if they really want or need to know more about, hey, why are we landing over here about my kid? It is their kid, right? So they can ask those questions and they have the right to ask it. Next question.
There was a day of play we had a few years ago, and the level of engagement in the kindergarten was just beyond anything of a normal day because it was all about experiential learning. And that was one day. And I know some teachers are much better at it than others in embracing that experiential learning. But how can we expand that beyond one day and have it be more integrated into our curriculum and maybe less of an emphasis on the early literacy, which I really have seen the push in the recent years.
So, sure. Go. I can keep talking.
Yeah. So I'm not a kindergarten teacher, but I really appreciate that that observation that you have of the children's engagement when that opportunity was offered to them, and I think one of the pieces that people, we often get really worried about is that if other people see that the children are playing, they're going to ask, what are they learning? And one of the things that we have to become really great at is knowing what children are learning as we set up these intentional opportunities for them to engage with. So, my son was lucky enough to have a kindergarten classroom where they had an easel, they had a dramatic play, they had blocks. Most of those things have sort of disappeared from classrooms right now, but the amazing, all those things that you want children to learn in kindergarten about other children, those are the places where they're learned, in play with other children, because problems will naturally present themselves, not only between over materials, but also over what stories that you want to tell. I think children become great storytellers when we enable them to play, and that's one of the pieces about this very focused learning on letters that I think sometimes takes away from the joy and motivation. And one of the things that we're always trying to hold in mind is how do we challenge, but how do we still keep children motivated and joyful in the challenge? And so many children become very disinterested in some of the things that are actually very fun to engage in, which is storytelling, learning how to write, and math, which can be really exciting. So I think just because we have standards doesn't mean that children can't play, and I think it often takes a teacher who says, we're going to do this every week. We're going to have a playtime for like 20 minutes or 30 minutes, or you've got to try it out, and you I don't think there's anything in. I don't think there's any. I mean, the only thing that's going to stop you, I suppose, is the principle. But sometimes we have to take risks. It's one of the things that we want children to do, is take a risk. We have to take a risk too sometimes, and just provide them with that opportunity. I think if you do that, you will see lots of children who will re-engage in the day-to-day of school.
And I just wanted to add also, I'm a firm believer of parent advocacy and getting parents on board with you around the idea of what it should look like in the classroom is essential. And that's one of the reasons why I even got into early childhood education, was because my daughter's needs weren't being met in the classroom. Took them out and did some homeschooling, did some further research, and then pushed for their education throughout their journey. And so I think that's the other missing piece, is that parent to get on board and pushing that educational system that Lori spoke about. Those systems need those parents' voice and culture to be spoken and to be prevalent in the classroom. So getting the parents on board with you is essential.
Question back here.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I have two questions.
I just wanted, just real quick, I just wanted to add that, again, the professional development that teachers within all the schools within the P3 grant are receiving professional development titled The Power of Play. And so that includes pre-K, TK, K teachers. And in going through that professional development, teachers are having conversations about, okay, so yes, like what you said, taking that risk and bringing it to the classroom, and if one teacher does it, then having the conversation and having another teacher do it. And then also the last piece I just wanted to say and emphasize is intentionality. So if there is going to be play in kindergarten, you have to be very strategic and intentional about the play, because there are standards that need to be met too in kindergarten.
Great, thanks. A couple more questions. We'll try to wrap up quickly.
Okay, I have two questions, one for Kelly and then one general. With Kelly, I'm wondering what you see as what might be the cause that African American children, boys in particular, are getting expelled from preschool more than Latino children. I'm just interested in what that might be about. And then the other thing is, how do you see, or can we all consider, the bridging the gap between all the wonderful professional development that's been going on and having it actually get into the classroom? Because we've now had coaches and people in there, and how can we increase the capacity of teachers to actually take a hold of what they're learning and make it a habit?
Are you speaking about the anti-bias education, or just in general, professional development that's happened in general?
Just in general, in the preschool, since that's where I spend my time, and in what they're learning. Like how to bridge this gap that I see that is not making it into the classrooms with people who really mean well and would like to see something happen. Like how to develop those habits or break old habits and integrate new habits based on the training that they're having.
So if I could just first speak to the disparity around children of color, particularly black boys. And so there's multiple research evidence that's out there, but Dr. Gilliam was the one that did the Yale study. And we know that there's also the Abecedarian, the Chicago study, the Perry study, those back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s that looked at children from impoverished communities, particularly people of color and black children, that really give us a basis for our preschool education now, what that should look like, what a quality program looks like. But what the study that more recently with Gilliam showed was that there's implicit bias. And there's bias that we all hold within ourselves for different reasons based on the education system that we've gone through. That is and in my first slide shows that our schooling system hasn't changed much in over 400 years. But that with that implicit bias, we're not realizing some of the things that we're doing that are being perpetuated. And so unfortunately, the black boy is the one that's most likely the one that's pulled out or most noted for, as Gilliam's study showed, that when he asked those teachers, those preschool teachers, to come together, watch this video footage of children misbehaving, and every time you see a child misbehaving, I want you to click it. And so we had actors doing these misbehaving situations where there was no misbehaving, but what we found was those teachers clicked and found that the black boy was doing all the misbehaving, the majority of it. And so when we shared that, or that was shared with the teachers, then it's like, whoa, I didn't realize or didn't appreciate it. But there's just so many aspects to why we get there, why that mindset is the way it is. I mean, not to judge the individual teacher who comes with heart and best intentions, but it's a part of our system. But I know that working with Marin County Office of Ed and with Carol and being a coach with Joe and doing the anti-bias education work was really, I felt, essential way of getting into the classroom and starting to unlayer some of that stuff that we didn't realize we had in us. And so having conversations, having a coach alongside of that individual and talking about some of these numbers and the data that's pretty startling that many of us aren't aware of, realizing that we do need to do something different. I think one of the first things, Carol, we were talking about was just the whole challenge and issues around literacy, the books that are out there for children that support and perpetuate the ways that we think about the different ethnicity groups, right? I mean, if we look at the children books and we look at Native Indigenous people, they almost don't exist because they're really not in the children's book. So just being more aware of things of that nature, and that was a really wonderful opportunity to support CAM, in particular, many early childhood education programs around just what does that look like and start to have those conversations because they need narratives. And that's one of the purposes of coming together and talking about it because we need to understand each other and stop labeling each other.
Okay, thank you. Another question?
Nancy got a question.
Oh, there wasn't really a question. I was just wanted
Can we use the microphone? I'll get to you next.
Okay, question on intergenerational trauma and the confusion of not having trauma-informed folks to understand that and how easily that rolls into implicit bias. How much work's being done identifying what's likely kids with high ACEs counts, parents with high ACEs counts, and intergenerational trauma, and how are we going to deal with that?
Okay, we're going to speak to that, Carol?
From our department, the ECE department at Marin County Office of Ed, last year we began with the leadership doing trauma-informed practices in the classrooms. And this year we have a series, we just had our first one 2 weeks ago, trauma-informed care. And it's put on by West Ed's Julie Kurtz, and they wrote the curriculum. There's 5 modules. There's actually 16 modules. We've chosen 5 of the 16 to start with this year. And it's just obviously deeply important, but the work that we're finding is, as with the work in the anti-bias, is that it starts with us, right? And so teachers, leaders, all classroom support, everybody actually in the program are invited to come and participate in all-day workshops. The first one was 101, Trauma-Informed Care 101. The next one is going deeper and self-care for ourselves as providers. We're looking at systems, at race and equity in trauma-informed practices, and there's one more that I'm not remembering, but that's just for this year coming up, to give you an idea.
That's just that project?
Not necessarily. So yours is specifically on
This is actually specific to early care and education, so 0 to 5, but anybody, TK or anybody who's serving children in the lower grades would also be very, very welcome to attend.
In regards to school age, there's quite a few opportunities that are offered through the county office, the Marin County Office of Education, for trauma-informed in collaboration with Health and Human Services, actually, that's happened for the last couple of years. I'm also seeing not only from locally the increase of that work happening, but also from the state and opportunities for funding to support the multi-tiered systems of support that acknowledge the social-emotional learning aspects and the needs of our teachers, having a better understanding of the framework in which the kids are coming to them, right? With whatever their experiences might be, whether it's from domestic violence in the home to getting bit by a dog, right? There are different triggering effects that happen for kids, and for sure there's a vast array of opportunities of learning for all levels of staff. Teachers, classified support staff, counselors that are working in our schools, as well as administrators.
Thank you. We're running late, but we do want to get your questions for those of you who can stay. A couple quick questions.
Who was a comment?
Okay. Did you want to say something?
Sure, if I have a second. I taught kindergarten for about 15 years and have done some training with teachers, and I think there's a real discrepancy in the understanding of play and also centers, because play is part of it's more infused in the classroom and it's not separate. So when we look at our kindergarten centers, it should never be paper and pencil and that kind of work. It should be exploratory, and play is part of the learning process. So it's a big topic and I don't want to talk about it right now, but I just felt like I needed to say that. In a kindergarten classroom, it should look like play, because that's how children learn. They learn through play. Okay.
Just a quick question. Retention of teachers. In New York City, they give you $21,000 per kid. In Alaska, it's $20,000 per kid. DC, $19,000. Connecticut, $18,000. In New Jersey, $18,000. In California, we give $10,000 per kid. Question, I guess, to you, Lori. If I gave you more money per kid, would you do better in retention, and would your scores go up for your K, whatever it is? Huh?
If I got more money per kid?
Teachers. Are we getting the best kind of teachers? I don't see scores anymore. I put 4 kids through Terra Linda, and the best school was Basics. The second best school, according to these grades in the whole Bay Area, was Terra Linda, where I put my kids through. If I gave you more money, in those days, I think it was better equity. You're only getting $10,000 per kid now.
Yeah.
Is the problem you have not enough money to retention of good teachers? Is it a problem that you do? If New York gives $20,000, these other outfits like Alaska gives $20,000, are you hampered by money? That's what I guess my question is.
Thanks, Fred.
That's not really a question I feel like I can answer completely.
So you're talking about resources, right? What resources are available for our teachers and our classrooms? Could we use more? For sure, right? You have more money to give us, give it to us. But here's the deal. At the end of the day, we get to serve the kids, right? We get to teach them, and it's contingent upon us also to get the appropriate training to meet their needs. So do we have enough money that's supporting education here in California? For sure not. Could we use more? For sure we could. We are lucky that we have a number of foundations throughout our county that support what we get to do on behalf of children. But what we want to continue to do is acknowledge the importance of our growth and our learning that needs to happen so that the kids are able to meet their full potential. That's the best way I think we can answer that right now.
Good teachers, can you keep them if you don't pay them? I guess that's my question.
Well, it's, sure. They can, that's really going to be up to them. There's a vast array of reasons why people come and go. But I think we've got some good ones here in Marin County, and we're lucky. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks so much for our presenters, to Lori, Joe, Kelly, and Raquel. And thank you all for your patience. It was a trying day for all of us. We'll do better next time. Hope to see you in September. Thank you.